Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. One of those at table with Jesus said to him, "Blessed is the one who will dine in the kingdom of God." He replied to him, "A man gave a great dinner to which he invited many. When the time for the dinner came, he dispatched his servant to say to those invited, 'Come, everything is now ready.' But one by one, they all began to excuse themselves. The first said to him, 'I have purchased a field and must go to examine it. I ask you, consider me excused.' And another said, 'I have purchased 5 yoke of oxen, and I am on my way to evaluate them. I ask you, consider me excused.' And another said, 'I have just married a woman, and therefore I cannot come.' The servant went and reported this to his master. Then the master of the house, in a rage, commanded his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town, and bring in here the poor and the crippled, the blind and the lame.' The servant reported, 'Sir, your orders have been carried out, and still there is room.' The master then ordered the servant, 'Go out to the highways and hedgerows, and make people come in, that my home may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited will taste my dinner.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Today's gospel reading is the last installment of Jesus taking advantage of etiquette at a formal dinner to preach the gospel, dinner etiquette. And the series began by talking about not taking a place of prominence and presuming that you're the most important person in the banquet, and be humble. And yesterday, the gospel was about how we have to be careful that when we throw a banquet, we don't invite only people who can repay us. In other words, we're throwing a banquet to receive favors, not to generously give hospitality. Jesus doesn't have friends for the sake of some return or repayment, but he has friends because he's willing to lay down his life for them. Today, he goes a little bit further on, perhaps you could talk about here the courtesy of an RSVP to a dinner invitation. And it's funny because when I was reading the gospel, all of a sudden I realized that I had a text message from somebody 2 days old inviting me to dinner that I hadn't responded to. Oops. That's taken care of now, of course. But the people who don't respond, if you've ever been involved, some of you who have families, if you've ever been involved in setting up a wedding reception, it's a little bit tedious when people don't respond to the invitations, or when somebody doesn't respond and they show up anyways, or if they say they're going to come and they don't come, and you've had 5 extra plates ordered to the tune of $30 a plate at the wedding reception, that is also uncomfortable. It's not only is it not polite, but it has no consideration for your host. And in this case, the host at dinner is Jesus. So these people, 3 people, have fantastic excuses. But if you pay attention to the text, he says the banquet is set now. There's a certain finality. It's now. It's now or never. And you're being invited. It's now. And they decide not to come. Two of the excuses have to do with commerce, material things. It's a material thing that distracts us, like working on Sunday so I can't go to the banquet at the Eucharist. It's commerce that pushes us away. And there's another one that I found perplexing at first, because this sounded like a great excuse. I just got married. I won't be able to make it. I have to be with my wife. And as I was looking at that, I was wondering if perhaps, as generous as this master was, I'm sure he would have made room for one more guest, the man's wife. And we're also told that not all the places in the banquet will be fulfilled, so I'm sure that wouldn't have been a burden for the master of the banquet. And so I thought, I wonder if there was something embarrassing about this relationship, maybe something not kosher about it that he was afraid to face. And so he couldn't bring her to the banquet. It's an interesting commentary on checking our relationships in the event that they might keep us from responding to the gospel call to be at the banquet. The final thing here, as we see, is the master of this banquet is generously lavish. There's a huge spread. Before any invitations have come in, the banquet is already laid out. It presumes some people are going to come. He's accommodated lavishly, even at the risk of waste. You can almost see Jesus at the cross. Everybody at a distance, only John and Mary at the cross. This lavish banquet set forth at Calvary with Jesus not only as the principal celebrant and presider at the guest, but who sent out all the invitations, and only few came to honor him. But his blood is spilled, nevertheless, poured out, his body given generously, even if only a few respond. He doesn't give half of it because half come. He gives the whole portion, even if only a few come, because so generous is God to us. It's a vision of his magnanimous generosity, even though we might not respond, but he risks that. And with that magnanimous generosity, you can see how he presents himself as trustworthy when you finally do respond to the invitation. Come, everything is now ready. And so it's a calling for all of us to rethink how seriously we've taken his invitation. It's time to RSVP today.
Regina Celi, letare, alleluia, qui aquam merum isti portare, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia, ora pro nobis Deus,